All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I often talk to a lot of musicians on the show, as you know, as if you're a regular listener to the podcast, so that's usually what the focus is. But there's also music scene, other aspects of the music scene that are involved in appearing on the show and involved in the whole kind of creation of local music, and that includes venues, that includes record labels, that includes record stores, includes zines. There's a whole kind of other ecosystem outside of just the bands that are performing on stage, and that's sort of what we're talking about here today on this episode. And we're going to be talking about a brand new label. So I think that's the best way to start this off is if you want to introduce yourself, give a bit of background about what it is you're doing with this project, and we can go from there.
Cool. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. Really appreciate it. My name is Elise Roller, and I am here to talk about our new label called Odd Doll Records. And this is underneath the umbrella of Misfit Music Inc., which has been a company in Manitoba for almost 4 years. So
Okay.
this is kind of our new endeavor, a new challenge for us. As yeah, I think we're we're very excited and also very like it's daunting. You know what I mean? But
Sure. Yeah.
there's a lot of excitement around it.
And my understanding is that this is you kind of calling this a first for Manitoba, right? The idea of this label is sort of a unique thing for the province.
Yeah, so this label is basically the first women-owned record label in Manitoba with a roster of acts.
Okay.
So there have been artists who are women who created a label to release their own music through, which is very smart. But there hasn't yet been a women-owned label that is basically taking risks and making investments on a roster of artists and several different releases. So yeah, it is a first.
Was the idea sort of to fill a gap that wasn't there? Like nothing like this existed sort of as it currently does?
I'd say that other parts of our business are more about that, but I think the record label, it's kind of just a natural um evolution of the way that music companies are working now. You
Sure.
kind of have to do everything and know everything because the landscape has changed so drastically over the last like 20 years and especially in the digital landscape. And I think for us, it's like we work with so many artists, like both through our mentorship program, which is called Artist Evolution, and then also on our management roster. And like they have really great music, and we're kind of like, oh, if we really, really love their music, and we're like, man, a label should sign this, but like they're not getting interest from labels. Like, why don't we just have a label and we also take on that role. And then I'll also say, like, as a manager, if your artist is independent and they're releasing music anyways, you're kind of like doing the work of a label. So you might as well expand your revenue streams. You
Sure.
might as well learn a little bit more about it and create further opportunities for both your business and your artist.
Well, one thing you mentioned just a few seconds ago about the sort of the landscape changing, and we're in this digital era, this weird era where it's not even clear how everyone listens to music because there's so many different ways to consume it now, and people get off in their own weird little silos of you can get stuck in one subgenre of music forever and never leave it, or you can be as wide as possible. What is a record label in 2025? I mean, I know what the, traditionally a record label is, but things have changed so much, even in the past 10 years. Like, what is it? I mean, as someone who's doing it, what does it mean to you to actually be a record label in this weird dystopian future we all live in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're figuring it out day by day. No, I mean, I think, traditionally record artists kind of like needed a record label just to be able to like afford to go into the studio and record music because it was just so expensive.
For sure.
And those labels like basically owned everything, and we've heard all the horror stories of these like really famous artists like not actually making any money off of their masters or very little. Um, and also like physical was really huge for
Yep.
labels in the past, like printing vinyl, printing CDs, making sure that they're distributed in stores. So that is still a level of the record label, and we would print um physical if it makes sense, if there's enough songs, if the audience desires it. But now we're sort of living in a landscape where not everybody wants or needs the physical. We do have like vinyl collectors, and if that's like the audience of the artist, then we're going to
Sure.
obviously print to vinyl. But we can also now sort of invest money in really unique merch and like attach download link to it or just even streaming links, right? So really the job of the label is essentially just to like market the recordings to an audience that is going to resonate with the artist. So that can look like all kinds of things
I'm
depending on
sure. Yeah.
who the artist is, right? And sort of just strategically be like, okay, what markets would like this music? Okay, we're going to invest in PR in this market because that makes sense. Or you're looking at it's a lot of nerd stuff where you're like looking at data and analytics and you're kind of like, okay, like where we see that the numbers are going up in this place, like maybe we should advertise here. And so yeah, it's really the marketing and the branding of the recording itself.
Okay.
And I would say that currently we're mostly focused on digital with the projects that we're releasing. But I love vinyl, I love physical, and it's definitely something that we're going to be doing. And however we do that, we'll figure it out as we go.
For
But
sure.
it's got to make sense for the artist audience.
That does make sense. Yeah, 'cause some artists they're not going to have anyone who cares about a CD or a record. They might be,
Yeah,
depending on the age and depending on the demographics and stuff. It could be just. I mean, my oldest kids in high school, and like that age group, they don't. Most of them don't have any physical anything. It's all just very much get on your phone and Spotify or whatever, and it's just there, right? So, and then you have me who
totally.
collects only physical media, and I'm like a dinosaur. But I mean, depending on the artist, right? It made more sense to appeal to people like me or appeal to people like the teenagers or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a lot of like sort of strategically looking at social media and being like, if your audience is mostly on social media, like how do you get their attention and how do you get them to not just like keep flipping through, but to actually like click on the music and listen? Because
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that is literally the hardest thing to do is to get people to go off the platform and listen to music. So that right now is probably the biggest challenge of record labels in the digital landscape.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah.
Um, but I love it. Like I love marketing and branding, so I'm excited to try to figure it out.
Well, you have the other music business experience anyway, right? So that's definitely helps in terms of knowing sort of what you're trying to do with this, rather than someone starting from scratch and not having any of that background. It's definitely a leg up, I think, for what you're doing. Do you
Yeah, yeah,
as far
100%.
as far as the artists that you have on the label and you're planning on having on the label, do you have sort of a goal of what kind of artists you're looking for? Are there genre limits? Are there sort of anything stylistically, or are you just sort of trying to find music that appeals to you and anyone else involved in whatever way?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both. Like we really want to, and I mean, like maybe we're dumb to think this, but like, like I think a lot of labels, especially majors, are like looking at numbers first and then listening to the music. But like we really want to leave ourselves open to supporting music that we just truly love.
Yeah.
And I think that there's ways you can be flexible on what you offer the artist. Like, is it sweat equity? Is it an actual financial investment? But we're really passionate about just releasing music that resonates with us.
Okay.
I would say that the one common through line is that we would like to release like, commercially viable, sort of mainstream sounding music, but with highlighting diversity.
Okay.
So whether that has like a message, whether there are some like cultural elements, that is the one thing that we're really passionate about. And also I think is like what is missing from mainstream music. I would say that that's sort of like our one thing where we're like, it has to be this.
Okay.
But we are all very open and we all A&R, like we all listen, we all share music with each other. So, we don't want to be super closed off to anything really.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have any artists in mind when this launched? I mean, when this idea sort of came to fruition, was there someone you were thinking of that you wanted to work with, or someone's that you wanted to work with?
Yeah, we've had a few and there's still a few that are like on our radar and we kind of want to work with them. But it will be more of a long game with them because they are newer.
Sure.
Um, so we've definitely flipped and flopped and we've been like, yeah, let's do this artist. Oh, let's do this artist. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes when you're deciding that. And I think also as like a brand new label, we have to be really intentional. Sorry, I'm getting a dry. I'm just gonna have a sip of water.
Yeah,
One
it's all
sec.
good.
Um, yeah, as a new label, we have to be very intentional about the first few artists that we release because they're kind of going to set the course for like our brand and
Definitely.
how we're perceived by the industry and also by audiences. Um, so we actually just made the decision literally like right before the new year because we're just like, how are we going to do this? Like, but we decided that our first two artists are going to be a couple of the artists who we already manage.
Okay, well that helps. Yeah.
Um, yeah, because we already had the teams in place. We already know the funding structures. We already kind of know the strategies behind it. We're not like reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
So Kelly Badeau for us was like a very natural debut artist. And part of that is like our brand. So it's under the Misfit umbrella. And then Claire is actually the one who named our label Odd Doll.
Okay.
But we want to keep up with the theme that we're misfits, that we're odd, that we do things that are like super unconventional and unexpected. And Kelly as like a debut artist. So it's a French album. Like our first, we're Anglophones in the prairies of Canada. And our first artist on the label is releasing a French album. And for us, it's like we're just trying to prove to the world that like language barriers don't exist if it's music. Like
Yeah, good music is good music.
music,
Yeah.
yeah, music is a language. It supersedes all language barriers. And we just thought that would be like a really neat way to start and to just show people like this is how open we are. And like Claire and I have started taking French lessons actually in the fall
Because of
for
this record?
Kelly
Okay. Yeah.
for Kelly and for this record. So like I'm like emailing their, her PR team like in France and it's sort of like Franglish. So like I'll start with like a line in French and then I'm like, okay, everything else is too complicated. So I'm switching to English. And then at the end, I'll like sign off in French. But it's just like we don't want anything to be like a wall that we can't somehow climb.
Yeah.
So Kelly was a very natural fit. And then I think today, when this is released, we're actually announcing that Kim Mortal is also going to be um on the label and it's pretty huge. Like this first single that's coming out today is features Shad
Oh,
and
cool.
which totally blows my mind because I
Yeah.
remember like being a young artist on tour and just like listening to Shad on repeat and being such a huge fan. Now I'm like, oh my God, he's on a song that I'm releasing. And Kim Mortal is like also just such an incredible, like an artist through and through. Like they designed the artwork um for
Oh,
this
cool.
like EP and single and it's like I can just riff so easily with Kim Mortal about the branding and the packaging and like how we're going to do this and so to have both of them on the label just made a lot of sense. It also gives us the opportunity to further invest in their careers in a way that a manager wouldn't necessarily
Sure.
do that. Um, and then it allows us to also like hire team members to support that because we are diversifying the revenue streams.
Cool. Well, you mentioned just a minute ago about the sort of the idea of the brand behind the label, and I think that it reminded me of a lot of labels that I like, and that this definitely goes more back to the pre-digital era. But there's certain labels where you know that you would like whatever they release. I mean, whether it's even if it's stylistically different, there's definitely some labels that I will even still go look at an album and say, oh, this is probably good because such and such label released it. Right? I think that's probably what
Yeah,
you're. It sounds like what you're sort of implying is that like you want to have good music regardless of being pigeonholed into one style or anything like that.
totally. And that's been the brand since the beginning, even of like the company itself. It's why I
Yeah,
called it Misfit, because I was like, well, I don't want to work with like one genre or like one sound because that's not like I listen to everything and I just love artists that like make good music
yeah.
and that also like carry a message and empower other people and it's like that that's sort of like our bottom line and everything else is yeah good music that empowers people.
Do you how many artists do you expect to work with like in the first I don't know 2 or 3 years of this project being launched? Do you have a goal for the size of the
Yeah.
roster?
Yeah, I mean I would say that like when I first was like, yeah, we're starting a label, like it was in my head, like, oh yeah, we're gonna do like 4 artists a year. But like now that we've actually kind of done the work and I'm seeing how much work it is, I'm
Yeah,
like, as we start, we'll probably do like a couple of artists a year, maybe three. And honestly, I think just like marketing, which is what a label does. You kind of have to experiment and like throw things at the wall and see what sticks.
sure.
Um, I can't really give like a firm number, but I would say that like if we do really well with these releases, and we can grow that revenue stream, and it does seem like, you know, okay, we know what we're doing and we can sign more artists. The other thing is like we have to be able to hire staff for it too, right? The
Yeah, for
more artists
sure.
you sign, the more staff you need. So, um, yeah, I mean, I would love to be, you know, like a lot of the other like indie boutique labels in Canada that have like 8 to 10
Yeah,
artists on their roster. That would definitely be a goal. But you know, we'll see. The music industry climate is very scary, just like it is in the rest of the world,
yes, yes,
literally.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the time we're recording this, obviously, this is still all happening. The launch of this and the first singles and
Yeah.
everything. Where can people find out more information about this label? I mean, people are going to hear this right when it launches, and they might hear it a year later. And by then, who knows how many records you have out and how many artists you're involved with, or even 2 years. I mean, I never stopped doing this show apparently, so it'll be around for a long time. So, what's the best way for people to find out more information about the label?
Yeah, well, they can go to our website at odddollrecords.com, not to be confused with oddball. It's odddoll, like a
Right.
doll that you play with. And yeah, I mean, we're on social media. If you look up Odddoll or if you look up Misfit, everything is kind of connected.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to find it. We'll be around, I'm sure. Hopefully you're listening to this in 10 years
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're still here.
Well, for people who are listening now, like at the time this is coming out, where can they find the singles the first singles that have come out? I'm assuming they're on
Yeah,
all the
so
various.
that'll be on odddollrecords.com.
Okay.
So you can go there and they'll be laid out right for you to check out. And then please follow the artists because they're amazing. And we don't need the attention like they do. They want your attention, and we're trying to drive the attention to the artists.
Yeah.
And they are absolutely incredible. So yes, go to our page and then follow our artists, please.
I don't know if this is a thing that happens anymore, but once you have the label launched and you're putting out releases, people have an idea of what it is. Are you expecting to get a lot of demos and things for bands? Like, is that something you want to happen? People to contact you with like listen to my stuff, or is it more you're trying to be more selective? It sounds like based on the size of it, you kind of have to be selective at this point.
Yeah,
But
we do need to be really selective. And I'll say like the thing I've learned the most operating in the music industry is like I want to be able to build a relationship with every single person I'm working with.
yeah,
We like all of the artists that we work with, it's like we talk like every day, you know? So I have to like you, we have to get along, we have to have be value aligned. And I don't actually think that like I don't know any managers or labels that like just get like a random demo from someone they've never met and is like, "Oh, this is magic. Like let's do it." Because honestly, it doesn't matter how good your music is. If you don't have a like the synergy of a good working relationship, or you don't get along with them, or you just like it like it's just not going to work, right?
yeah,
So for me, it's like we don't really want unsolicited demos. We have we're out and about, we're down to talk, we like to get to know people. We also have a mentorship program, which is actually what both Kelly and Kim Wardle went through before we
cool.
started managing them and signing them. And that's a really great way for us to get to know people. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. We're like, oh my God, like do we have like an auto reply on the email to be like, we're probably not going to listen to your music if you send it this way.
Yeah,
And we don't want to be closed off, but there are ways to build relationships with us, and we've tried to make ourselves very accessible, like through that mentorship program,
yeah.
who the artists we're currently working with have gone through. So yeah.
For sure, yeah. I mean, even doing a podcast, the amount of unsolicited requests from people who want to be on the show
Yeah.
who have never listened to it clearly because what they do is not even remotely, having any Manitoba connection. They're just like, "Hey, can I be on your
Right.
podcast?" No, you can't. So I
Yeah.
imagine the label would probably have a lot more of that as soon as you got it sort of out there and and people know what it is.
Totally. Yeah, and it's funny how you're saying that. It's like when people reach out and it's like you don't like you clearly haven't looked at my
Yeah,
roster. Like you
yeah,
clearly like and you it's like you haven't listened to my show. Like you don't know it's like if you're reaching out, like figure out who you're reaching out to because like you're wasting your own time.
for
Like
sure. I know it seems like just adding another CC'd email, but yeah, it's a time you don't need to waste on someone who's not gonna have any interest in what you're doing, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, I mean we I've always said like I really want to be able to get back to everybody who emails me, but then I started to realize as our name got bigger as a company that like it's literally not possible. So if
Yeah,
anyone ever emails me and I don't email them back, it's like I get like 100 emails in my inbox every day and there's no way I can possibly answer everybody. So if it's not like a priority and I'm too busy like with the artist that I'm under an agreement with, like then I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
gonna answer, you know,
for
like and
sure.
it's I'm not I used to think like industry people were such jerks, but then I became one and I'm like, oh my God, I literally don't have time.
For sure, yeah, yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I get it. As far as obviously the singles are coming out first. Do you have are there EPs or full lengths happening with either of these artists
Yes.
yet that are sort of in the works?
Yes. So the both of them are basically kind of officially announcing that there is a bigger project.
Oh, cool,
Kelly's actually been dropping like some singles sort of up until this point, but now we're sort of like, you know, on the final stretch towards the album. So Kelly's album called Belzam is coming out on May 2nd, which
cool,
is her birthday. I was like, yeah, algorithms are gonna love this release, you know? And then Kim Wardle is going to be releasing their EP on June 11th, right before they go on US and Canadian tour.
cool.
Yeah, so pretty excited. It's going to be very busy until up until those dates. But yeah, we're really looking forward to having our first two projects out in the first half of this year.
Awesome, awesome.